I'm doing well, gentlemen. And hey, one thing before we get into football, maybe the White Sox weren't actually as bad as we all think. When you look at the powerful division they play in, with the Tigers, Guardians, and Royals still very much in the thick of things trying to win the Fall Classic. So maybe there's a silver lining for White Sox fans on the South Side.
It was last August when Jerry proclaimed how it was going to be quick, and that's why they hired Chris Getz, because he knew the organization. And I'm not making this up, Todd. He cited the awful division in which the White Sox play as to why the White Sox turnaround was going to be quick.
He's a scout.
It was a year ago, Todd. It was 1
His
year ago.
His tremendous analysis of it all.
In all of his wisdom, he decided to say that. And it is also why I don't think you'll ever hear Jerry Reinsdorf speak publicly again, because I think the powers that be over there are like, Jerry, maybe you should just stop talking for a while, champ.
He just didn't explain correctly the kind of turnaround they were going to go through. They were headed south instead of heading north in the division pecking order.
It's amazing. You know, a team like the Mariners, they got to be sitting around going, well, we're not the Royals. We didn't get to play the White Sox 15 times. Like, if you just missed the playoffs in the AL, you really got to be smart that you didn't play in the Central.
It is definitely a different dynamic, and it's why we all love playoff baseball. It seems to be like the sport gets played at such a different level with the intensity and how quickly 162 games go out the rearview mirror with these short series that we'll have. And we'll see exactly who gets sent home packing before we move on to the divisional series that start in earnest on Saturday.
So great. All right, we move into Week 5 in the NFL. The Bears are home. And wouldn't you know it, the Bears have the longest winning streak at home in the NFL going back to last year. They've won 7 straight outright. They're 6-1 against the number in those games in a close call where they didn't cover, I think missing just by the hook. Kind of seen this line go between 3.5, maybe 4. Bunch of defensive injuries for the Carolina Panthers. Do you think the Bears move the ball, find some success, and cover by margin this weekend?
You would hope that they're able to build on some of the momentum that last week's 24-18 win against the Rams generated. That was one of the more polarizing games in the betting market. When you look at professional bettors who went, wait a second, we just can't see a scenario where the Bears win and win by margin, where they're at a coaching disadvantage. But the Bears, from a personnel standpoint, clearly were the healthier unit and were able to go out there and find a little bit of wiggle room late. When you look at the Bears and what Caleb Williams has done, I mean, I know Bears fans don't necessarily want to hear it, but 787 passing yards this season is actually the most by a Bears quarterback in his first 4 career games. So he's trending better than the illustrious history of Bears pivots that have come before him, and he can become the first Bears rookie quarterback to win 3 of his first 5 games that he started since Craig Krenzel back in 2004. Talk about a pretty impressive company. I look at the game here, and while I think the Bears ultimately become the side, I just don't feel comfortable laying the 3.5 or 4, expecting them to go out there and win comfortably. You know, Andy Dalton has given this Carolina offense at least an identity, getting the ball out of his hands quickly, spreading it around. We've seen Deontay Johnson, probably the primary beneficiary in all this, with 7+ receptions and 80+ yards and a touchdown in back-to-back games for the first time in his career. I'd like to see the Bears take more vertical shots. There are going to be some opportunities to hit some big plays over the top. We look at DJ Moore, just 8.5 yards per reception this season, a career low, compared to 14.2 yards per catch that we saw last year. I know protection has been a challenge, just so tough to try and lay points with the Bears in back-to-back weeks. So I'll be on the sidelines for this one, and if the weather clears up, there is a chance that I may find myself to value bet the over, knowing that there could be a path for both these offenses to move the football.
Speaking of that, how do you ever make Jacksonville a favorite anywhere? They're a 3-point favorite at home against the 2-2 ground and pound Indianapolis Colts team that doesn't mind watching the offensive line do all the heavy work out there. How is Jacksonville favored by 3 points?
I think the big question for Indianapolis right now, Yerk, is not only who's going to be the starting quarterback. Will we see Anthony Richardson return from injury, or will we see Joe Flacco get the start? It's what this defense will look like. They could be down as many as 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And while Jacksonville offensively doesn't leave anyone brimming with confidence, given what we've seen from Trevor Lawrence and the regression so far this season, if we get an Anthony Richardson start for the Colts and this number comes off a 3 down to 2.5 with Jonathan Taylor being ruled out, the only way that I could look at making a case in this game would be to back the Jags, because I look at them defensively, and while that secondary has been a major liability for Ryan Nielsen through his first couple of games, I'm not sure Richardson would be the quarterback that could pick them apart. If we do get Joe Flacco under center, which a much more capable and competent vertical passing attack, I think you could make a case for going over the total. Weird game because, you know, we talked about this at great length, how much more efficient the market gets. Years ago, you'd have had an opportunity to lay a very short price with Jacksonville in the desperate spot, but 3 kind of feels like the perfect number, so you're going to want to monitor the injury report before coming to a conclusion here. With Anthony Richardson up for the Colts, I'd like the Jags, and with Joe Flacco in the game for the Colts, I can make a case to go over.
Bears play that Jayville team in London next week. First international game is this weekend, and it's the Vikings, if you want to call it hosting, the Jets over in London. This is an interesting one because who could have figured that the Vikings would be 4-0, and just the way they're doing it. I mean, this offense has been awesome by almost every metric, Todd. Tied for first in points differential. Darnold on pace for 47 touchdowns. I mean, come on. He's QB3 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation. It's just incredible. And you got the revenge factor against the Jets. I'd ask you this question just about the handicap to start, though. When you think of all those issues that the Jets had in a home game along the offensive line last week, does any of it carry over against Brian Flores and some of the different looks and some of the different pressure packages that he's going to show the Jets? Or is Aaron Rodgers right? Like, it was just a weird outlier game and they'll get it cleaned up?
You know, there are some legitimate concerns for the Jets on both sides of the ball. When you look at the way they performed offensively last week, we can attribute that to weather or a variety of other factors. But Aaron Rodgers won't be 100% for the trip to London. He was clearly hobbled late in that game. I know he was a limited participant in practice. Talked about some swelling in his knee, so something we're going to want to pay attention to. To your point, Carm, we know that the Vikings are going to send pressure, do everything they can to heat him up. But what I found interesting with this Vikings defense, and I know it came in a game where they had a comfortable lead against the Packers, you saw Green Bay look to utilize a little bit of pace and tempo in that second half. And one of the things the Vikings said is it caught them off guard because they weren't able to get the right personnel packages out there. So for a Packers team who hadn't shown a lot of no huddle, they were able to hit a bevy of explosive plays in comeback mode, and a bounce here or there. Green Bay almost erased that 28-0 deficit. So we'll see if the Jets are a little bit more aggressive. We know Aaron Rodgers loves to try and mix up his cadence, and that has been a hot-button topic this week in terms of making players more accountable. But I think they'll be better along the offensive line. The other question you have to ask with the Vikings, and they deserve a world of credit, being the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight games within a season, all without trailing, all versus teams who won playoff games the previous year. I mean, this team hasn't had to face much in the way of adversity. They've trailed for a grand total of 3 minutes and 26 seconds through the first 4 games of the season, and 3 of those games most recently, guys, they were listed as an underdog in all of them, in wins against the 49ers, Texans, and, of course, last week against the Packers. But this number's gotten out of control. You will see an appetite from professional bettors if it gets to a full field goal. Not sure it gets there. And for me, the only way that I would probably have the Jets on my card might be looking to tease them up to get them through that 7, as I think this will be a competitive football game from start to finish.
How about Ravens-Bengals, where Cincy's the intra-division home dog here, and you kind of understand why, but it is below a field goal. This Ravens team is the weirdest 2-2 team I've ever seen. Let's face it, they're an inch away, and a strange fourth quarter loss against the Raiders from being 4-0. The dominance in the run game is evident. And with Sheldon Rankin still dealing with a hamstring injury along that Cincy defensive line, I mean, I wonder what the ground game will look like for Baltimore, and will it lead to a lot of success? I mean, the Panthers had a success rate on the ground north of 55% last week in that game against Cincinnati. So what are we thinking about Ravens and Bengals this weekend?
When we look at Baltimore, despite their 2-2 record to start the season, I haven't downgraded this team at all in my power ratings. I've actually upgraded them a half point from where I started the season, but I feel like this is a different matchup that they haven't yet had to encounter. And we look at the one team that the Ravens have played, or I guess I should say 2, that can throw the ball with some success. The Raiders torched them in the second half a couple of weeks ago, and we saw Kansas City do the same. I know people are sitting there going, wait a second, what about the Bills? The Bills are about as methodical and vanilla with a vertical passing game as you're going to find, and I think last Sunday night was a reflection more of Joe Brady having a poor game plan than anything else. In steps a Bengals team who needs this game like blood, and while you never want to try and create the narrative case around desperation if it's not built into the number, there's a reason, guys, why this number is 2.5, and it can't get to 3 anywhere in the market despite overwhelming public support. You mentioned the Bengals' leaky run defense, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, this group is downright pathetic in that regard. 25th in rushing yards allowed per game against, 32nd in rushing success rate, but they should get some reinforcements this week. Miles Murphy expected to potentially make a season debut at defensive end. There's a chance that McKinley Jackson plays. B.J. Hill upgraded yesterday in practice, and while Sheldon Rankins will be out, it's just getting big bodies in the middle. I think Cincinnati can play on their front foot. They can test this Ravens secondary. And you know me, I love to sell stock kind of at the top of the market, and I think that's what we have here with the Ravens off that Sunday night win. We'll call the Bengals the best bet here, plus 2.5. Would love to get 3. I just don't think the market is going to allow it to get there, although there is that overwhelming public support on the road favorite.
There's one of the best bets. I like it. Todd Fuhrman is our guest from the Bet the Board podcast. Get it wherever you get your pods. Follow him on X at Todd Fuhrman. He'll join us every Thursday at this time live in Vegas to break down the games. It's Carmen and Jurko on ESPN 1000. A couple other quick ones here real fast. You know, for a lot of people here listening, you know, with the rules, you cannot bet this game because it's a state game. But Indiana and Northwestern, I love what's happening in Indiana. I love the story. You got to love the coach. Any coach that's so confident to say, you hire me because I win, just Google me. How do you not how do you not love him? Indiana is, I think I read 5-0 for the first time since like sometime in the 1970s, maybe even before that. But are the Hoosiers ready to go on the road, even against an anemic Northwestern offense, and lay double digits, lay 2 touchdowns? I'll ask you for a quick handicap for anybody that can get to one of the sports book or just has one of the old-fashioned bookies that might want to look at that game this weekend.
You know, I watched this game in its entirety last week, Indiana against Maryland. It was a little bit of a battle in the market. Indiana closed a 7.5-point favorite. You look at the Hoosiers, they win the game by 14 points. Nobody blinks. But in that game, they were -4 in turnovers. That is extremely rare to win a game in conference going away when you finish -4 in turnovers. You look at Indiana right now, and overall, from a schedule perspective, there's a legitimate path for this team to go 10-2, maybe even 11-1. The only game that they'll be a decided underdog in is the road trip to Columbus right around Thanksgiving. I'm not comfortable laying the big number here with them on the road. You're going to want to pay attention to the weather forecast, as all Chicagoans know. Wind gusts expected to be north of 20 miles an hour, sustained throughout the course of that game. Makes it tough to win by margin. I'm not stepping in front of the freight train, but I'm not going to back Northwestern here. Kudos to the Hoosiers, though. They'll have a chance to exceed odds makers' expectations going over their win total that was set at 5.5 before we even get to the middle of October.
How about that, before Halloween? Pretty good. All right, so you said Bengals, and I like the handicap on that one. Any other best plays you want to give out?
You know, we'll go to a game in college football that I don't think anybody will really watch. The number got back in range, so I'm happy to give it out with the Nevada Wolfpack catching 7 against San Jose State. You look at Nevada, and they had a grueling schedule early on, had to crisscross the country twice. I think their bye came at the perfect time for them to hit the rest and recharge button right before conference play. They should have a ground and pound advantage against San Jose State, and if you're going to give me the opportunity to back the better defense that can run the football, too good for me to pass up, so I'll take Nevada as a road underdog against San Jose State +7. And we talked a little bit about one showdown in the AFC North. The other marquee game Sunday night with the Steelers, a short favorite. I know people are reluctant to lay money line prices, but shop around. There is minus $1.35 widely available, but I'm happy to still endorse the Steelers at -2.5. I just think that this is a Cowboys team that's not being discounted enough for who they won't have on the defensive side. And while the Steelers' O-line raises concerns, I like what I've seen from Justin Fields, both as a thrower and a runner. I think the Steelers find a way to bounce back. They can make the Cowboys one-dimensional, and they win the game by more than a field goal.
Those injuries on defense are pretty significant, to say the least. All right, excellent stuff as always, my friend. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.
Always a pleasure, gentlemen. Good luck at the wagering window this weekend.
You too, buddy.
Thank
There's
you.
Todd Payne Insider. We'll get Paul